Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week it was another slow weekend at the box office. In fact, the slowest Labor Day weekend in 15 years. And today we're going to review the fourth film in the Transporter series, religious film War Room, and Robert Redford and Nick Nolte in A Walk in the Woods. Our home media moment is Robert Duvall and James Franco in Wild Horses. And our double feature of older films is my pick for old classic Purple Rain and Russian film Ballad of a Soldier in our Oscar A to Z. And now that summer movie season is officially over, it's time for our annual best and worst of summer list, which we will get into in the middle of the show. First up, though, it is Transporter Refueled. Joe?
Well, you know, I was making fun of the title originally because typically whenever you have Refueled or something like Reloaded, it's usually just kind of a poor way to try to reinvigorate the franchise.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, Joe, the original title was so much worse.
What was it?
The Transporter Legacy.
No, I'm glad they didn't do that, though, Justin, because at least Refueled, it works with the car motif.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, fine, whatever, Refueled. Anyway, Transporter Refueled is an action thriller film directed by Camille Del Mar and written by three people, one of whom is Luc Besson. It is the fourth film in the Transporter franchise, but it features a new cast with Ed Skrein replacing Jason Statham as the title role of Frank Martin. Former special ops mercenary Frank Martin is living a less perilous lifestyle than he had before, transporting classified packages for questionable people, which is basically what he did before. So, I don't know if it's much safer or low-key. There's this mastermind, Anna, a former prostitute, and her three accomplices orchestrate a bank robbery and kidnap Martin's father in order to confront and kill a human trafficker who had victimized Anna and her friends years earlier, drawing Martin into their scheme. The first Transporter I like. It took itself kind of seriously, but it didn't really sacrifice its plot too much to the editing and violence. That was the second movie, which I really thought was horrible, and I didn't see the third one. So I was really kind of going with very low expectations for this. Now this one mostly does the latter, but at least it embraces what it is. But that's not the problem. When the movie tries to have legitimate drama, that's where it really suffers. Still, Skrein is a decent substitute for Statham, though he seems to have more of a sense of humor than the serious Statham did. Now, this might not be as true to the character, but I thought it was acceptable. At least he had a sense of humor. The action was mostly alright. The plot was silly, but overly convoluted. But the worst thing for me, which really kept it from, like, true guilty pleasure, was the lead female character and her posse, Anna. I feel they were supposed to be someone that we could get behind, but they're really horrible people. Like, if you just asked him for help, he'd help you. This whole convoluted plan about kidnapping his father, it's so pointless. And just their actions further along made them just despicable. And the way the movie ends, it's like, oh, you know, they're great because of this. No! You're a horrible person, and that all builds with this really, really bad final fight scene, which is some of the worst choreographed fights I've ever seen. Where it's rocks versus knives. It's really one of the worst final fights I've seen in any action movie, which is sad because building up to that it was alright. I might be being generous here. I leave it with the C-.
Now, is this the same character that Statham was?
Yeah.
Okay, because I never saw any of the original series.
Let me put it this way. It's the same character, but I'm not really sure
name only?
It's the same character because
Gotcha.
literally if they had just gave him a different name and said he was like a relative or something, or he like was trained by Jason Statham,
You would have bought it.
I would have bought it because I'm like, it doesn't seem like the same guy. Like Statham, as you know, is usually serious, I'm not going to get involved. I guess I'll get involved. This guy's like, I'll help you with almost no, oh yeah, we kidnapped your dad. And then on the drop of a dime, you know what? I sympathize with you, former prostitutes, even though you're psychos.
Well, there's a few positives, I think, with this movie. You hit on most of them, Joe. I mean, I think the acting is slightly better than Hitman. I thought the acting in Hitman was awful. But the emphasis is definitely on slightly.
Okay.
I don't think this lead actor...
Skrein?
He's not nearly as charismatic as Statham.
I don't think so.
Again, I never saw Statham in these particular films.
You know, though.
But, I mean, you know, seeing him in the 3 or 4 that I have... He's a fairly charismatic guy.
For me, I mean, I don't know. You guys could probably pick up on this. Even you, Dan. He's just not as intimidating.
Yeah, it just wasn't doing it for me. I do agree there's a few decent action sequences. That last one with The Rock...
Dude, that was horrible.
...was ridiculously bad. It was terrible. The dramatic stuff doesn't work. You're right about that. The script, just in general, is pretty horrible. I thought the car chase sequences were rather ho-hum. And I didn't really care about anything that was happening. I didn't care about the father plot and the woman. It was all so generic. But now, Joe, as you said, the worst thing you can be is forgettable.
True.
So, in that regard, I'll definitely remember Hitman more for being as horrid as it was.
Interesting.
This is not as bad as Hitman.
Okay.
In that regard, but it's forgettable. So, I give it a D.
It's really interesting.
I was more engaged in this than Hitman. The acting was a little better. The action sequences were a bit better.
But Hitman has transcended to the greatness of bad
completely forgettable. Hitman, I'll remember every F this year for sure. I won't remember this movie in 2 weeks. You know, you've said that on the show, that the worst thing you can do is be forgettable, and this is forgettable.
Well, our grading for it might be different, but I do feel the same way. I think this is technically a better movie.
It is, and that's why I'm grading it better than Hitman, but I will remember Hitman for sure.
A week from now, I'm probably going to forget it,
Absolutely.
except for the fact that it's a Transporter movie.
Yes. Absolutely.
I was basically forgetting it straight out the door.
Wow.
All right, well, Justin, let's hear all about it.
We're back to the franchise that made Jason Statham, as I've mentioned several times on the show, the angry British guy who punches people.
Basically.
Without the original angry British guy.
Yeah.
Clearly, this movie wants to walk the reboot line somewhere between Mad Max Fury Road and The Bourne Legacy.
Yeah.
But the result kind of contradicts everything that Frank Martin's about. He's got the rules. There isn't a whole lot of backstory. What is this movie trying to do? He's got a dad. He cares about his dad a lot.
Which I could buy.
But it's nowhere on par with the original character. And the other thing that kind of bothered me, but I also thought was kind of hilariously bad at the same time, was how easily he was willing to break his own rules.
Oh, yeah. So much easier in this one. Yeah, in the first movie, it's like...
He's fighting it like to the bitter end.
I'm going. I'm leaving. Not part of the... I'm gone. I'm done.
This one, it's like, I don't ask.
Let me ask.
Let me ask. The moment things seem a little bit tense.
And then he asks literally asks 20 questions about what's going on.
While they're in the middle of a car chase, I might add.
I did one action scene I did kind of like, though, that I thought was kind of Frank Martin-y, was when he has the car on like cruise control and it's going like 2 miles an hour and he's beating up the guys outside.
That was awesome.
I thought that was kind of cool.
That was the only interesting car scene.
That's because he had it perfectly timed. I'm like,
yeah,
that was kind of cool. I liked it.
The action sequences, with the exception of the finale, which is abysmal, I won't even pretend to justify it. Honestly, it's not bad. It's just I wish they weren't so shaky cam with it. Mm-hmm. We're zipping here, we're zipping there, 30,000 fast cuts later, and the scene's done. We've seen maybe a third of what happened. But for me, it's about on par with Hitman. I leave the Transporter Refueled with a D.
Pretty standard schlock.
But the first one is good.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm told.
The first one's okay. I mean...
It's like a B.
It's entertaining. I wouldn't say I have any burning desire to ever rewatch it.
It's about on par with, like, decent action movies. It's like an Escape Plan sort of thing. It's not
bad. I
bad.
do like Escape Plan.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Okay.
It holds together. It's pretty solid, but it's not like, oh god, it's the next Rambo or something.
I just didn't care about anything going on in this movie.
Well, you know what? That's the thing. At least the characters and the situation of the first movie, you legitimately can get behind what's going on.
I mean, I feel like there are ways to make this character likable without shoving his entire exposition down our throats. Like, oh yes, he has a dad, and his dad is always getting on his case about being late.
I always thought he was likable, but he's Jason Statham, so it's basically just Jason Statham, you know?
Well, it's kind of like The Rock.
Exactly.
I mean, no matter what The Rock is playing, he's fairly likable.
It's the same thing.
Right.
Essentially. So he's fine. And this guy, he was okay. You should have just gotten Statham back. But they did offer for him to do this movie, but apparently there was less money involved, which is never good. And they also didn't show him the script at the time, so he opted out for it. So
I can't fault him on that one, man.
And to be fair, one note to Scrine, though, he did actually, approach Statham for some tips about the
Is
character.
that right?
Yeah, as a kind of a passing the torch. So he tried. It's
there's
some heart there, I think.
It's not entirely his fault. It's just the fact that it had a lousy script, and editing-wise, it was a nightmare.
Editing, though, I think it was still better than the second one. The editing for some of those fights in the second one was horrible.
I'll let you have that one, Joe, because
we haven't seen.
I haven't seen 2, 3, or the show. So
you never saw 2?
There's a show.
Yeah,
there was briefly
the Transporter
a show.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably why Refueled happened,
Glad
actually.
I missed that.
Yeah.
I heard it was pretty bad.
Yikes.
I watched like the first episode. It was standard.
All right, well, up next we have War Room. This is from Affirm Films, the Sony branch that brought religious hits Courageous and Fireproof. And this comes their biggest hit yet in War Room. Directed by Alex Kendrick and co-written by him and his brother Steven, the film deals with married couple Tony and Elizabeth Jordan, played by T.C. Stallings and Priscilla Schreier, having a really tough marriage and constantly fighting in front of their daughter, played by Alina Pitts. Elizabeth, a realtor, meets with an elderly Christian woman named Miss Clara, seeking to sell her home, played by Karen Abercrombie. And Miss Clara challenges her to refocus her fighting and establish a battle plan to save her marriage, including turning one of her closets into a room where she can pray in private and post favorite Bible passages. A war room, if you will. We've certainly seen our share of faith-based films in the 2 years we've been doing this show, and I tend to be on the higher end of them, but there's no denying that typically the acting is horrible and corniness prevails in most of them. Now, War Room does get pretty corny at times, but actually has some well-acted scenes, especially for mostly unknown actors, and a couple of scenes that pack a real emotional punch that will have the regular churchgoers in the audience shouting out hallelujah, more so than I think many of the Christian films we've gotten lately. But the main issue with War Room is that it's tonally not on solid enough ground. There's this weird dream sequence, an out-of-left-field mugging side plot, this really shoehorned-in jump rope contest that lasts like 5 minutes. His daughter's a big jump roper. It's a whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah, Joe didn't see this one. So, but anyway, yeah, so that was my main issues with the film. I think tonally it was a little bit out there, and, you know, I think that has to do with the directing and the editing. But the main actors, I think, are doing a good job. Corniness aside, I thought it was alright. I leave War Room with a C. Justin?
I feel like these Christian movies are more or less becoming the indie force to be reckoned with in Hollywood. And while I still find their agenda incredibly heavy-handed, I don't think that's going to get any better anytime soon. At least the stories are. And aren't being, what I would argue, Westboro Baptist caliber hateful towards other faiths. Now, I'm not going to deny the fact that there's numerous hokey moments in here, and easily one of the worst shot and directed sequences all year.
Dream sequence?
Dream sequence.
It was awful.
Horrible on so many levels.
And it didn't need to be there.
No, it was pointless.
Yeah.
But I do have to say, it flowed surprisingly well. I would occasionally check the time, and I was like, wow, and I'm not that bored. And a few tolerable performances. I feel like the elderly woman does a good job at some spots, and other times
she's a little hammy sometimes. But,
gets,
you know,
yeah.
I thought she was all right. I mean, look, half of these people don't even have Wikipedia pages, so they are like not your even C or D level actors, you know.
But I mean, to cap this one off, I can't really call it good, but compared to the likes of God's Not Dead, this is basically Citizen Kane. I leave War Room with a D.
But that's only slightly higher than God's Not Dead. Didn't you give that a D minus?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I
like
understand.
I said, I cannot in good conscience call it good. And to be honest, it was pushing a D plus until the super, super heavy-handed.
What about Heaven is for Real, though?
Preachy.
Because isn't that, you saying that's much better than this one?
Well, at least that was basically a studio film. This is more or less independent.
So independent films can't be good, Justin?
Wow.
That's not my argument, Joe.
I don't know, man.
All right. Let's get back on track, though.
Okay.
That seemed like a much more positive review than a God's Not Dead or a Do You Believe. But the grade isn't much higher. It seemed like you thought the acting was a lot better than what we usually get, which I agree with.
Better in spurts.
Yeah.
There were some scenes that were good. There were some that were incredibly heavy-handed. I feel like every single actor in this movie more or less has at least 5 hammy moments in it. And apparently the director had the word monologue scrawled in everyone's
I thought Schreier did a good job. She does have one scene where she goes a little bit overboard, where she's shouting at the devil in her living room.
Pretty much.
But other than that, I thought she gave a really good performance from somebody that has virtually no experience.
Well, compared to the other Joe Schmoes they have, better, but mediocre is only a minor step up.
That's fine, but D is not mediocre. Like, you say you can't call this a good film. I'm not calling it a good film with my C. I'm calling it an average film.
But like I'm sorry.
It seemed like you liked it a lot more than God's Not Dead and other religious movies we've talked about. But your grade doesn't reflect that to me.
Once again, we'll go back to my statement, not all grades are created equal.
No, but just a hair above for many, many more positive things doesn't balance out to me.
Probably would have been a D+ if it wasn't for the super, super agenda-heavy conclusion and the ridiculous finale that is all over the place. I mean, like I've been saying since we've started, my reviews are based on narrative. I think we can both agree, Dan, this movie is tonally all over the place.
True, but you, in your own review, said that the story here is a lot better than what we've gotten lately, which I would agree with.
It's got more originality than Do You Believe, which basically is faith-based version of Crash. Then we take acting, which, I'll be honest, has some passable moments. Other times it's just hammier than hammy. I don't feel like we have to go that far into it. And then I take stylistically into effect. Pretty much brings nothing to the table, and when it tries to, it gets even worse. And overall entertainment value, which might have been the boost up if it wasn't for that incredibly heavy-handed conclusion.
I don't know. I feel like this is sort of a broken record from last week when we did We Are Your Friends. Certainly, Christian people are going to flock to this in droves, as they did all these movies.
Yeah.
And they have, with this one in particular, I guess because of its relationship to Courageous and Fireproof, which were both huge hits, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't help the Nicolas Cage Left Behind, but that's a story for another day.
Correct.
You got to take into account.
You have to take into account that they are going to love this movie, and they do. I mean, if you ask anybody coming out of the theater, they would probably give it an A. I'm not going to say it's an A. That's ridiculous. But
no, you're right.
You know what I mean? But I do think if you have like the scale, I agree not all grades are created equal, but a higher grade is a higher grade. And when you look at my grades for the Christian films, it's like, you know, God's Not Dead was in that D range, so was, I believe, Mom's Night Out, and some of these other ones. And then you move up a little bit from there, you know, Grace Unplugged, which we actually talked about before we ever even had a show.
Really only a couple steps above
average.
Left Behind.
Yeah, Left Behind was an F.
I'll tell you what, the audience thing made a lot of sense. I'll bump it up to a D+.
All right.
Just because I can see Christian audiences getting into this and
loving it.
And
loving it.
In the case of my theater, basically feeling like I was in church.
Sure.
Hallelujah.
That's not me being offensive. That's just me making a point.
No, people were shouting.
That's good.
I saw it on a late night one, so mine wasn't as full. But I have heard from other customers that people were just.
It was a little energetic.
Shouting, yes, which. Obviously, it's making them feel, you know?
Yeah.
I wasn't shouting in the the transporter, you know, except maybe to say, stop it. Put the rock down, you know, whatever. But
stop.
Well, let's move on here. We've got A Walk in the Woods up next, and that's going to be with Justin.
Robert Redford plays Bill Bryson, a writer returning home to America after spending 2 decades in England with his wife, played by Emma Thompson. Bill decides to reconnect with his homeland by hiking the entire Appalachian Trail, but when everyone turns him down to join him, his only option is to team up with a colleague by the name of Stephen Katz, played by Nick Nolte, a former alcoholic.
A Nick Nolte-ish type character, you'd say.
A Nick Nolte-ish type character, as the two set forth to embrace the wilderness and everything Mother Nature has to throw at them. Interesting fact about this one, this has been in production for about 17 years.
Whoa!
Originally supposed to star Newman and Redford as a sort of reunion from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And all I have to say is, for that much time to be in production, clearly a passion project, this product deserved so much better. It's not that it's terrible. Redford is really trying to give it an effort in this, even though he is definitely being Redford. Not a bad thing.
No.
But the story cares about being more or less of a fluff piece than some outlook on the wilderness or getting older or some variation between the two. There are a few fun moments, though I'll be honest, every side character is completely and utterly wasted. Thompson did not need to be in this movie. There's a couple cameos that are just complete throwaways.
Steenburgen didn't do anything.
Steenburgen did not do diddly. And it just never reaches anywhere beyond standard average mediocrity. I leave A Walk in the Woods with a C.
Joe?
Well, I mean, I agree with you, Justin. It's pretty by the numbers. And I think it got a little pretentious at points. Redford basically tells the audience what the main themes of the movie are several times. It's not subtle at all. I still liked a lot of the comedy, though, in the situations. I did think the performances were really good. I really did buy the chemistry between Redford and Nolte. And I thought there was just some fantastic cinematography. I mean, it's not...
Land Ho.
It's not Land Ho, but it's only a few steps down for me. I leave it with a B.
Well, as we talked about on the show, Redford has had such a great resurgence in the last few years. He's part of, by far, Marvel's best offering in Phase 2. He gave the great one-man show in All Is Lost, intrigued us in The Company You Keep. Meanwhile, Nolte runs the range of okay to forgettable to just awful lately.
Yeah.
And I feel like Woods kind of splits the difference between these two actors' recent careers, meaning that it's all right. I wasn't bored with this movie, but why does this film pale in comparison to other recent Finding Yourself journey movies like Wild and, as Joe mentioned, Land Ho? It's partially because the people Redford and Nolte's characters run into aren't that interesting. Like Justin mentioned, they're just kind of throwaway either cameos or they're also trying way too hard to be quirky or funny, the side characters. Like, I love Kristen Shaw, but they kind of like have a couple of scenes with her and then they ditch her, and it just, it wasn't funny. It was just weird.
I thought it was annoying.
There's such opportunity for really interesting conversations, like you mentioned, Joe, or soul-bearing discussions. But some of the dialogue is so bland that it just never rises to the occasion. Now, I will say, though, the two actors do have good chemistry together, as I think we would expect. And the cinematography is great. I just wish there was more to this movie. I leave it with a B-. I wanted to give it a C+, but I can't say I was bored with it at all. I just think there was a lot of wasted opportunities here.
No, it could have been.
We can agree on.
Yeah.
Could have been much better, that's true, but I thought it was alright.
Well, I enjoyed Land Ho very much.
Yeah, I did as well.
And I enjoyed Wild very much as well. I believe I gave that one an A.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like these, journey movies. I liked Into the Wild as well, a movie from, long before we did the show. But why was there no introspection in these characters?
There was
in such small spurts.
I was going to say, like, the big moment that was, like, supposed to be the most powerful when we more or less see Nick Nolte's character try and confront his reformed alcoholism has almost no weight whatsoever.
Mm-mm.
No, it's because they got it over with too quickly.
I couldn't agree more.
And that's with a lot of the scenes. There's moments and they just kind of divert.
Yep.
Well, and I think it ends up being, Justin, I think it was you that said it, this fluff piece where it doesn't hold any weight, and it should. Especially with these great actors.
To be fair, though, I think it's also an audience thing. Because when I saw it in theater, a lot of people were really laughing and really were into it. So I feel like in regards to the whole introspective thing, I think also some of the people that I was sitting with, I think were also into camping. And myself, I think maybe I had a little more of a attachment to that idea.
Okay.
So I could see somebody getting more out of it without it, blatantly having a lot of speechifying.
Well, I will say this, and this obviously happens quite often, but the people I know that have read the book were pretty disappointed with the film.
I could see that.
I've heard that.
Right? They said that the book was really funny. They didn't really get that here.
To be fair, though, that's like most movie.
I agree, and that's what I said to them. I was like, well, that usually happens, you guys.
Even with the best, people still come.
But I think, with a movie like this where you can explore nature like that.
Well, hey,
and that wasn't the problem. The cinematography was fine.
Hey, I'll be honest. I probably would have given it a B- or C+, but their cinematography was gorgeous.
It was pretty great.
It was pretty good.
It was. Wasn't quite Land Ho.
No.
Well, no.
But it was pretty close.
Yeah.
I thought. Those valleys,
man. They definitely had some good valleys and some good scenes.
Mm-hmm.
There needed to be more weight to this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's move into our home media moment, and that is Wild Horses. Joe's going to tell us about Duvall.
Wild Horses is a crime film, barely, written and directed by Robert Duvall. It was his first directed film, I think, since like 2002. What was the one he did then? Do you guys remember?
I don't. I know the first one was The Apostle, which we did for the A to Z, but there was one or two in between there.
Yeah, so he hasn't directed in a while, and we'll get to it. The film stars Duvall, James Franco, and Josh Hartnett, who gives like the only decent performance in the movie. Detective opens up with a 15-year-old missing persons case, and the investigator begins to suspect that the boy was murdered by a local rancher, Duvall being involved. Now, this movie seems like a bad parody of a Walker, Texas Ranger episode, except
I can see that.
without decent scripting, acting, or any sense of pacing or fun. Think about what I just said. Duvall really is one of the great legends, okay? But this movie is a disaster. Within the confines of a potentially interesting plot exploring a lot of really great concepts, it's buried beneath this really horribly underdeveloped script with acting ranging from barely passable to inexcusably bad. There is a scene where this Texas Ranger gets shot at, and she says, this was the dub that they passed, "Oh, I was shot."
She was the worst actress in this movie.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Now, there are a few potentially good scenes, some subtle moments here, but they are not enough to save this movie for me. Give it an F.
Whoa, all right. I'm a little bit above you, but I agree that the story has no focus. Any element here that garners interest just simply isn't explored, thus leaving me sort of wanting more, but then at the same time, I was never that engaged in the first place, so I didn't want that much more.
I'll tell you what.
I just wanted something coherent.
It got to about the 40-minute mark where Duvall sits down with his family, and things finally start to get interesting.
Yeah.
More or less.
And then they pull it away.
Literally, Duvall will say, "This, I'm going to drop this on you. You going to talk about it?" No. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I'm 40 minutes into this boring, dull movie, and it finally gets interesting, and then you drop it. I guess I'll keep watching it, because I have to.
Well, and yeah, to that end, it sort of becomes this exercise in, I sort of care about some of this stuff, but if they're just going to leave me hanging on every plot line, I'm out.
Basically.
You know? And it's funny, everything does pretty much get wrapped up. Well, not everything, but like 2/3 of it gets wrapped up. But by then, I just didn't care anymore. So, I didn't think it was the worst thing. I'd leave it with a D+. Justin?
Well, I'm glad I wasn't the only one finding this movie all over the place.
No, I thought it might be okay, but I was...
The acting isn't good. You're right. Hartnett actually is okay in
He's like the
this.
only person I thought gave like an
Franco's
okay...
awful.
Franco was like making... He was like hamming it up.
Listen, I was thinking...
He was hamming it up.
While I was watching it, that Franco may be another one we could do a bottom 5 with. He is a great actor. We've seen him do many things, but he's got a lot of stinkers, too.
He's got some bad moments.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Justin.
If we were still titling episodes, I'd probably make a strong case for this one to be A Tale of Two Roberts. Both very talented actors who somehow missed the mark. It's finally happened, ladies and gentlemen, and I kind of hate myself for it. We have finally gotten a bad Robert Duvall performance. I never thought I would see it within my lifetime.
Dude, it's pretty bad.
Oh,
It's awful.
Oh,
it's
I'm going
an
to shoot
atrocity.
you Mexicans
Yeah,
now.
no, it's awful.
Oh, I hate you, gay man. Go read your Bible. I'm like, dude.
That
No.
was bad.
Dude, you're not even trying. And this is something you obviously should care about. I don't know.
But I mean, he's bad. The lady ranger
she was
subplot
awful.
Oh.
Razzie worthy, if any.
You know what? Before you even finish, Justin,
Please.
I'm done. I'm going to drop it to a D.
Thank you.
All right.
I forgot how
she's
awful she
and
was.
she's like, they make her so integral for
Yeah.
I know,
no
they
reason.
really
my gosh.
do.
She's horrible.
Cracking accent too.
You're right.
She's trying to have a Mexican accent and a southern one, and it just varies.
And then
within like
it ends up being French,
Midwestern.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm sorry, woman. I apologize, but it was horrible.
Yeah, it was bad.
And directing
No.
too. Duvall, come on. Like seriously, how? This is the guy that made The Apostle. How could you let some of these
The
lines
Apostle was
slide?
good.
Really? You know?
Not even remotely close to the greatness he used to be capable of.
Nope.
You can clearly tell he's just going through the motions, both in the lead and behind the camera with this, making it nearly impossible to feel sympathetic for his character, which they try to, but instead they just make him increasingly bigoted as the film goes along. So when we finally do get into a sort of fall from grace, it's like, no, you are a horrible individual and you had this coming.
Yeah.
It's a mess. I don't care. And I shouldn't be saying that less than 5 minutes into the movie. I'm with you, Joe. I give it an F.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't care about much, but I cared about a couple of things towards the beginning. Nothing happened with any of them. I would have liked to have seen
No, like
a little bit.
The frustrating part for me is there were genuine hints, like a few minutes here or there, where I'm like, wow. Like
Where's this going?
Like Franco and Duvall actually had like a decent scene where he says something like "Silence was always your best defense." I guess it still is. Wow, that's like an Oscar-worthy scene. Mm-hmm. It lasts about 2 seconds.
What about the scene where they're in the car singing?
Cheyenne? Oh, jeez.
That was painful.
My point is that there's few trickles. So, I mean, I'm not saying there's nothing good in the movie, but there's not much.
No, there isn't. I agree. There is not much.
Josh Hartnett was fine, though.
Yeah, somehow he
But he's
out
more
of
or less
this,
of a big part in this movie, though.
Yeah, but...
He is, but we haven't seen him in a long time. It was good to see him.
Well, I mean, he was
Penny
been
Dreadful.
busy. Yeah, I was going to say, doing Penny Dreadful.
Oh, I don't know anything about that. I know it exists, but I didn't know he was in it.
Big TV
I know
show.
Eva Green, takes her top off all the time in it.
Oh, yes, she does.
That's about the only thing I know. Well, I haven't seen him in a movie in a while, anyway.
Well, that's because,
Okay.
he had to, dive back into TV and they
But even
saved
before Penny Dreadful, that's only been on 2 years. What was he doing the 8 years before that?
him. Since
Random Indies.
Indies.
City
I mean, Sin
1?
City 1 was the last thing I really...
Probably less,
Remember?
super mainstream thing he did.
Was Hollywood Homicide before that?
Yeah,
no.
03. That's why I went off the
Don't
radar.
bring it up.
It's so
Oh,
funny,
it's
though.
so bad.
What's the opposite of Perdition? A movie that doesn't get talked about and should never be talked about.
Bad movie?
Yeah. God.
I'd say
All
Runner
right.
Runner, maybe.
Oh,
Condemned?
Runner
I
was
don't know.
bad. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move into something much more fun, and that is our best and worst of summer wrap up.
So how
So let's dive into this. We're just going to do 10 through 2, bottom 3, and then we'll crank out our favorites.
Okay.
Well, Justin, why don't we start with you?
Okay, kicking mine off at number 10. Shaun the Sheep movie. I thought this one was a really cool idea. Trying to stick with the formula of the show, being free of dialogue, and still retaining a very innocent wit, and still managing to find ways to be touching, silly, and just overall a fun ride for the whole family for the summer. My number 9, Spy. This one caught me by surprise. I'd heard of the really positive reception ahead of time. I was expecting another heat where I enjoyed myself, but I never had any real interest to watch it again. This was like, okay, I might finally be able to get on board with the Melissa McCarthy movie. It's both a sort of parody of sorts to the spy genre, but also a really clever homage at the same time. I thought the supporting cast was really great. Rose Byrne's amazing as the villain. My number 8, Trainwreck. Now, Judd Apatow, not the best track record with me, but getting Amy Schumer to write the script and him just sort of roll with the punches, I thought it was really well done. One of the better rom-coms I've seen in recent years. Schumer and Hader had great chemistry and some of the best laughs I've had this summer. My number 7, Dope. This was one that I feel like fulfilled what we were hoping Dear White People would be. It's very intelligent, but it's also giving us more of a storyline to go with. There's some great characters, some really sharp commentary, and probably one of the best final moments of the entire summer. My number 6, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. I was never entirely convinced we were ever going to get better than Ghost Protocol, but they found a way. They retained the intensity of 3 and the fun excitement of Ghost Protocol and gave us a great movie that's a really epic adventure. I may not be the world's biggest Tom Cruise fan, but I'm very excited to see where the franchise is going next. Number 5, Love and Mercy. We've seen many a music biopic, but this took such an interesting angle with it and did it so well. We've slammed Cusack all over the place with his more recent choices, but he's back in spades. Elizabeth Banks is fantastic. I still think she could get a supporting actress nomination for this, and apparently if we ever need an evil manager, all we have to do is call Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, seriously.
Really engaging story, fascinating character study about Brian Wilson's psyche, and great Beach Boys music. What's not to love? Mm-hmm. Number 4, Mr. Holmes. This is one that I could have seen going a bunch of different ways, given the fact that it's not a Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story. I'll be correct addressing here, but Ian McKellen, fantastic in this movie. Truly brings the iconic character to life and embraces the fact that it's a counterpoint to the iconic sleuth that we know and love. And I think it gives a unique portrayal on him and shows how he could evolve. My number 3, The Gift. There are many different celebrities turned filmmakers. Angelina Jolie, Ben Affleck. I gotta say, Joel Edgerton has one heck of an eye, to say the least. He gives us a really original story, gives us some great characters, and quite possibly some of the best suspense all year. Also gives a very, very smartly done, ambiguous conclusion that more than welcomes a conversation about it. My number 2, Inside Out. Hey, Pixar comes back, and they come back swinging. It's a great concept. It's beautifully done. The voice acting is sensational. Tear-jerking moments all over the place. Pixar is the master at that. Made me laugh, and honestly, if I was going by personal enjoyment for the summer, this would probably be number 1.
Oh, wow.
I just feel like the top 5 and the top 10 lists really are about our personal enjoyment.
For the most part, I mean, generally speaking, a movie doesn't make it to like the A's if you don't like something about it.
True. I'll go next. My number 10, I had a big struggle with, I had one slot left. Which R-rated comedy do I put in there? Do I put Spy or Trainwreck? I gave them both a B+. I enjoyed them both very much. I went with Spy.
Okay.
I love Amy Schumer, but I think Spy is more consistent because though Trainwreck does have some good dramatic moments, it has a difficult time pulling them out and going back to the comedy. And I think Spy really was a great showcase for Melissa McCarthy's comedy. Justin made a point on the show about something that I actually hadn't thought about when I watched it because I'm a fan of hers anyway, but Justin typically is not. And what you said, Justin, is that this is one of the only movies you've seen, or only roles you've seen, where she's playing a character you can actually get behind. And I agree with that. I think her character here is great. I think her interplay, and I forget the actress's name, the British woman that she goes with.
About, yeah.
I thought they had a great chemistry together, and Rose Byrne, obviously, great villain. So I went with that as number 10. Number 9 for me is The Gift. I agree. Edgerton really, really put out something special here, both in the directing and the writing. It's a great thriller. Bateman gave a great performance. It's got so many good twists. It had some problems, but the movie is good enough that they can mostly be overlooked.
Yeah.
Number 8 is Far From the Madding Crowd. I imagine I'll probably be the only one with this one on my list.
It was on the short list.
A lot of repeats, I know. But this one, I think I may stand alone. I thought Carey Mulligan really gave an outstanding performance here.
She was good.
She was. And I do agree, from what we talked about on the show, that the guy she marries is useless, sort of useless, here. But I thought Michael Sheen just gave a great performance. This character of hers is very, very strong. And for me to really enjoy a period piece, I think, says something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Number 7 for me is Straight Outta Compton. The performances here, I think, blew everybody away. They're just so good. Eazy-E, Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, the people playing these well-known figures,
like Mac G,
were just fantastic. Paul Giamatti here, as well as in Love and Mercy, doing the great evil manager bit.
Evil?
Not as evil in this, though.
Corrupt, maybe?
Not quite.
Corrupt is probably a better word.
Okay.
Yeah. But really, really a good biopic. Definitely runs on too long, but very enjoyable. Number 6 for me is Shaun the Sheep movie. For me, probably the biggest surprise on my list. I really am not a huge fan of this animation style. I thought this movie was funny. I thought it was clever. It really spoke to kids and adults on 2 different levels, like a lot of the best Pixar movies do. To me, it's a surprise coming from Aardman Animation like that. Number 5 for me is Dope. Really, really blew me away. This performance by the lead actor was great. Fresh on the scene for this movie, and he just gives such a grounded and real performance as the Malcolm character. And I thought it was funny in the right places, but certainly dramatic as well. Had a lot of things to say about youth culture and drug culture and a lot of different things, romance even. Number 4 is Amy. And that is the Amy Winehouse documentary. Just a heartbreaking portrayal of this woman. Had a lot of issues, and they really covered them all, I think, pretty fairly. They did a lot of interesting things interview-wise with the style of the interviews. Just a really, really good documentary. Number 3, another music picture. This is the year of the music picks, I feel like.
Oh.
Love and Mercy, just absolutely fantastic. I would love to see Elizabeth Banks get a supporting actress nomination. We know her, obviously, in so many of her comedic roles, but I'd say of all the great performances in this movie, and there isn't really any bad ones.
No.
I think she actually gives the best performance in the picture. John Cusack certainly gives us his first good performance in
Long time.
let's say
3.
a decade.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I'll let you have that
Were
one.
you going to say 3 years,
Well,
Justin?
If you
He
guys,
was forming a 3.
if you guys liked 1408, it would be like 8.
I liked
Oh, I
1408.
do like 1408. All right,
So
8
let's-
years
that's 8
then.
years.
Yeah.
I do like 1408. You're right. But Paul Dano, another great performance here, and I just love the idea of giving one man the two separate stories, just in two different avenues of his life: the 60s Wilson and the 80s Wilson. Number 2 for me is Mad Max: Fury Road. I mean, I've never seen anything like this movie. The directing, the editing, the guitarist on the back of the truck
Warrior.
is fantastic. I really think this is just a brilliant movie from start to finish. I know some people didn't like that maybe we didn't know enough about these characters. I didn't care. I was on for the journey just like everybody else was.
I guess it's proof that you don't need much of a plot to make a great movie.
True.
Well, you need to keep it simple and have it stay true to that form.
Yeah.
Which I feel like a lot of movies don't do.
Stick to the formula.
Joe?
I like your list, guys.
Thanks.
Might be 1 or 2 surprises from me. The first one for me is Fukatsu no F, or Return of Frieza, Dragon Ball Z. Yeah, I thought this was a great one for the fans. It was a lot of fun. It was tough though, because I had a lot of spots for this number 10, but I'll give it to Dragon Ball. I thought it was a really fun time. Number 9 was Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. It's a pretty big surprise for me, but this movie hit all the emotional notes for me in the right place. I thought the performances were great, really touching. Number 8 was Dope. I still stand. I think that this movie has probably one of the best main characters of the year so far. I still think he's really up there. Just as you said, Dan, great commentary on a lot of things, music.
Yeah.
Teenagers, the college struggle, drug life, I'm sure like life out on the West Coast, just a lot of different issues going on there. Number 7 was The Gift. Honestly, like you guys said, just one of the best thrillers I think we've seen in years. It really, really is up there. Definitely one of the best for sure. I have to say the performances were all really good here too. I will say it was one of the big surprises because I'll tell you, that trailer just made it look so cheesy to me. But for once, the trailer failed. The movie was a great success.
Another end of watch.
Exactly. Another example. That should be a term too. If you have like should it be end of watched?
Let's go with that.
Like all the bad trailers for great movies. Number 6 is Mr. Holmes. I mean, Ian McKellen, just great performance as usual. And I did like that they pursued a different angle with the Sherlock Holmes character for once, having that more, I want to say like a more realistic portrayal for him as an old man. I think they covered a lot of ground there. Number 5 is Straight Outta Linwood. Compton. I mean, just really a fantastic film. I do agree, maybe a little long, but I didn't really care. I thought it was great. I thought the performances were amazing. I thought it delved really well into these men and their lives, and the music was great, of course, and it was well shot, edited, just from start to finish. You know what? I could have used more. I loved it, and that's always a good thing. Number 4 is Dark Places. I mean, just Charlize Theron, fantastic. Really, I just loved how gritty and dark this movie was. Another great thriller that was a bit of a surprise for me. Really, really interesting. A few minor issues, but still great. Number 3 is Inside Out. Mostly, I'm just going to say Pixar strikes again and leave it at that. Really. Number 2 is Love and Mercy. I think really just the best Cusack performance in a long time, like you guys said. But pursuing both aspects of his life, I thought was amazing. Of course, great usage of the Beach Boys track. And you know what? Thus far in the year, if Elizabeth Banks won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, I'd be fine with it.
I think I'd be all right with that as well.
I don't see any reason not to.
And like I've honestly thought that she hasn't had the best collection of films for the most part, but this really showcases a strong dramatic side, which I wouldn't have expected. But yeah, Love and Mercy was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's go to the other end of the spectrum and talk about our 3 least favorite films of the summer. Justin?
Number 3 on the worst of the summer. No Escape. I shouldn't expect too much from the same guy who gave us As Above, So Below. But if you're going to use as much Steadicam as this man does, let it breathe. There's like at least 18 different tracking shots, and they're boring. There's no tension whatsoever. It's tedious.
It's true.
And to be honest, I started getting so terribly disoriented that I actually got out of my seat, watched from afar, and occasionally stared at the ground to make sure I didn't get nauseous.
Dizzy.
My number 2, Sinister 2. take what was one of the better horror films from a few years back and more or less flush everything that was good about it down the drain. Everything about this movie feels underdeveloped. The villain, I'll be honest, I don't understand what role he plays anymore.
Well, the kids are the villains in that one.
The kids are more or less the villains in this time around, which is strange. I get that it was like one of the key elements of the first movie, but it just holds no weight. And then the new characters are so bland and lifeless, and it almost has virtually no continuity to the original film whatsoever. It more or less just opens every flaw from the original and makes it so much worse. And the worst of the summer, the gallows. Now, I would like to draw attention to the fact from my review, talking about the character of Charlie Grimmel. Dan and I found out shortly thereafter, not true. But here's the thing, listeners. That is one issue out of endless horrible things that can be associated with this movie. Bad acting, unlikable characters, shaky cam, cheap effects. I'll give them a little bit of credit for the fact that they found a way to stretch that $100,000 budget. But if you're going to make a movie about theater, at least give us characters that are somewhat sympathetic. Instead, it just turns into a really bad Paranormal Activity knockoff. And even that's putting it politely.
You're right. I mean, I think if you're going to make a movie about anyone, you should make characters you can get behind, whether it's in the theater or not.
Look at...
Just any movie, I feel like, needs characters you can get behind. That's typically one of my problems if I can't find anybody to get behind.
We ran into a similar issue last year with God's Pocket. I'm not going to turn this into a war.
Oh, God.
Wait, what?
No, don't. Just... Yeah, but he was only unlikable to you. Joe and I did like him, and that's why we graded it higher.
I was going to go Breaking Bad on that, but...
Tony Soprano.
Okay.
Bad guy,
Sopranos.
likable.
He's a good guy.
Yeah,
He does bad things. Good guy.
See, this is...
Great debate. Well, my bottom three starts off with a real recent entry, and that's Transporter Refueled.
Wait, what?
This movie stinks, and I did not care for it. It's boring, it's forgettable.
Pretty bad, I guess.
The acting is weak, the rock fight, it goes on. Number two, Fantastic Four. Oh. This movie almost received an F from me, but it didn't because of basically Miles Teller gives a pretty decent performance. Michael B. Jordan gives an okay performance. Kate Mara also appears. She's not horrible, but,
She's not quite good
I expect better from Kate Mara, let's just say that. This movie is terrible. It just skated by with a D. Usually when we do the year-end top 10 or bottom 10, I only have 9 Fs, and so typically the last 2 years anyway, the number 10 slot has been reserved for a non-F. Huh. I imagine it's going to be Fantastic Four. This was so close to an F for me. It's awful. Number 1 for me is Hitman. This movie really is just unnecessary. The plot synopsis that Joe suggested from one of the games when we reviewed it on last week's show would have been 10 times better than this. I would have been so much more intrigued. Joe, please write the next Hitman movie and cast it while you're at it, because the people they got to play in this movie were terrible.
To be honest, I can think of about 3 good bald people that could play him.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Corey Stoll's in about every third movie. Get him in.
You know what?
The Hitman.
Not a horrible choice.
Right? Call it a day. All right, so that's my bottom. Joe, what do you got for your worst of summer?
Okay, well, for my worst, it's tough. Gallows didn't quite make it for me, though. Disappoint you, Justin, but it's still pretty bad. Number 3 is Irrational Man.
Short list as
that
well.
Was bad.
God! I mean, at Woody Allen, just, look, take a break. Just take a couple years. You can breathe. You've made enough movies. You've got some good ideas here, but please, just take some time to flesh out these ideas, and then you could have a competent script, but talk about nothing. Like a vacuous void of nothing. Only reason I didn't fail was because there were some decent performances and potentially good ideas, but pretty boring film. My number 2 is Fantastic Four, because it's an abomination. Okay?
It's one of the worst things.
I did a video about it and I said, how did we get here? I don't know. Fantastic Four is not that great, but they deserve better than this. And Wild Horses. It's just unbelievable how you could have such competent people behind the movie and produce something like this. It's one of those examples of just, you look at some of these scenes, hear some of this dialogue, and you think, either people thought this was good and there was something off about that day, or they just didn't care. Either way.
Well, who questions Robert Duvall?
Sometimes you have to have more thoughts behind it, to produce a good product. I don't know if Duvall just didn't care, but obviously by his acting he didn't care. So it's
Definitely not.
It's pretty rough. I would not recommend it all, as I said on the show.
All right. Interesting. We had each of us had a movie from this very podcast.
Tail end of summer is usually...
Yeah, tail end of summer is not typically good. All right. Well, Justin, what was your favorite movie of the summer?
Well, no surprise here, gentlemen. Mad Max Fury Road.
Not Paper Towns?
No, sorry, Joe. But, I mean, took forever to get here, but the wait was worth it. George Miller just gave us a fantastic movie, kept it simple, but rocked it so well. Hardy is perfect as the new Mad Max, paying homage to the iconic character made famous by Mel Gibson, but yet making it his own. Charlize Theron is great, and honestly plays off Hardy beautifully. Great action, great energy. I'm very, very excited to see where the franchise is going next, and easily the biggest blockbuster of the summer in my book.
Well, I have a huge blockbuster for my number one, and that's, of course, Inside Out. Mm-hmm. The great Pixar has struck again, and who knows what the Oscar movies are going to bring, but I wouldn't be surprised if, once again, Pixar has my favorite movie of the year. They've done it several times in the past, including Toy Story 3 and Up, and Inside Out is just firing on every cylinder. It's funny, it's heartfelt, you bring your tissues, you cry about it, you laugh about it. All the characters are great, though I wish the concept were as original as people thought. Classic Herman's Head right there.
Comes up a lot.
Because it's just a ripoff of Herman's Head. But that's all right, because they did it very well, and they picked a show that is so obscure no one noticed. So it's okay.
Guess so.
No, I love this movie. It's fantastic. But not Fantastic Four, because that was terrible.
Or the Fantastic Five?
Actually, the Fantastic Five
Yep.
would be more apropos. You're right.
Yeah, hey, well, they did The Incredibles. What if they had those same characters in superhero roles?
I would love it.
Might be kind of fun.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no surprise. My number one is Mad Max Fury Road. Basically everything Justin said. I think this movie proves that you can have a movie that's an incredibly fun blockbuster and still be incredibly well made, just in every aspect. I mean, the directing, the acting, the script, and just... the movie looks beautiful. I mean, there's the cinematography and the special effects and the time and effort and probably blood and sweat that went into this movie. Mm-hmm. It's there, and it's put together in a very, very coherent way, and it's still crazy and amazing and absolutely a fun time. Just pure adrenaline injected into a movie. A lot of fun.
For sure. And speaking of the big blockbusters, Jurassic World just made my short list. That obviously was a huge record-breaking movie this summer. It's already the third highest grossing movie domestically of all time, but not as good as these.
No, it wasn't.
No, it really wasn't.
It was fun though.
It was. It was a lot of fun.
It was,
but
it was Jurassic Park.
It was Jurassic Park
with a little
with
extra,
some twists and woman running in heels. Old standby. At least they pointed it out. At least they pointed it out. I know that doesn't make it better for you.
To be fair, yes, they did point it out.
Yes.
If they hadn't pointed it out,
I would have been mad too. Actually,
it would have lowered my grade.
Yes.
It would have probably lowered.
I agree. All right, well, let's get into our final two movies. That's our double feature of older films, and we kick it off with my pick for old classic, and that is Purple Rain. In this, Prince plays the Kid, a struggling Minneapolis guitar player with a rough home life, whose band The Revolution, played by themselves, is about to get the boot at the local club where they play if they can't start bringing in more people, like their rivals Morris Day and The Time, played by themselves. Day even poaches the Kid's girlfriend, Apollonia, also played by herself, to head up a new girl group so the club has a new act to squeeze out the Revolution. Now, say what you will about this film. Is the plot about as basic as it gets? Yes. Are the characters ridiculously one-dimensional? Absolutely. Yeah. Is it cheesy? It's Purple Rain. Obviously, it's very cheesy. That's no surprise. But the reason it works is because maybe it's the best example of making a movie feel like a concert. Something many other films have tried and not done as well with. Rock of Ages, my guilty pleasure from earlier in the year, Burlesque. It certainly helps that the Purple Rain soundtrack is quite literally one of the greatest albums of all time. I would like to say that's my opinion, which it is, but It sold 22 million copies. It's ranked highly on basically any list. Entertainment Weekly named it the #1 album of the last 25 years. Rolling Stone, put it behind Thriller as the top albums of the 80s. It's an accepted fact at this point. Beatles are great. Purple Rain is amazing. And that's why the movie works. The extended concert scenes alone are worth the price of admission. Now, its cult status, I would say, likely comes more from it being cheesy than the great music, because it is. But yet, to any Prince fan worth their salt, it doesn't matter. I leave Purple Rain with an A-. Justin?
Got to give props to Prince for allowing him to play a character that's not always the most likable, but does that excuse a weak story? Aside from Prince's borderline sociopathic protagonist, whose purple motorcycle is so bad it's actually kind of good.
Yo, the purple motorcycle was amazing. Yo,
particularly when he uses it for vigilantism at one point.
What are you talking about?
Yo, that was great, man. I want a purple motorcycle like that.
This story is mostly an excuse to sneak in pop rock songs whenever appropriate. They're incredibly good, and I can totally see why the album is so beloved. But there still needs to be a legitimate story to go along with it. And I feel like it's mostly 5 minutes of story, very, very long concert scenes, 5 more minutes of story, really long concert scenes, end of movie. I live with C+.
Joe?
Well, you're both right.
Cheesy goodness.
to be honest, I'm kind of in between you guys. I have to confess, when I watched this, I did not know how I felt about it.
Okay.
It's definitely silly, and there is great music. There's no denying that. But it's definitely more style than substance, for sure, which I generally am okay with. I feel the plot is certainly wacky and underdeveloped, but I thought there were some good scenes of decent drama here or there. Basically, though, it's just unbridled 80s fun with great music. Kind of a guilty pleasure for me. I think I'll leave it with a B-.
Okay. Well, I think you could sort of characterize Prince's entire career as style over substance. Most of his songs are about getting laid. He rocks the guitar.
Yeah.
And he's very flamboyant on stage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that is sort of a metaphor for his entire career. So I'm not surprised that you found the movie to be that as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
It probably is. The story's not great, but
it's okay.
It exists.
I thought it functioned pretty well for the underdog, struggle.
Yeah, it's basic.
I mean, it was there, but I agree. The characters, though, are incredibly one-dimensional.
Oh, sure.
But I mean, if you're going for like a concept album come to life, where it's basically just artsy,
why not just do a bunch of music videos then?
Then it wouldn't really be a movie.
I don't know. There's been a bunch of musician-style movies that have been structured like that. I mean, look at all the movies the Beatles made back in the '60s.
But they were movies.
But they were basically one gigantic music video.
You could say the same thing about this, couldn't you? Kinda. I mean, there's a lot of...
Yes, you absolutely could. Yeah, why couldn't you?
Because I feel like this is trying to shove more of a, outside story into it.
But it's all connected. I mean, the story is the same throughout. Random music videos is... Typically, that's not the case.
At least, the music video is forming kind of a coherent story.
I mean, if you want another example, look at True Stories.
Okay.
Those were mostly Talking Heads music videos put together, but there was no story at all. It was vignette-based. And that's obviously not what they were going for here.
Well, Justin, would you prefer this movie if it had less of a blatant story like The Wall, where it's basically just the album?
Actually, I've actually got more than a handful of issues with The Wall, but that's a story.
Because I mean, it sounds to me like you want it to be more like The Wall in that case, which is basically
it's more
what
or less
it
a matter
connected
of if
story
you're
of.
going to make it a very music-heavy movie. You still have to give us a legitimate story. Instead, it's more or less, we don't really have any real fleshed out characters. We're just more or less having everybody play themselves to some extent and running with it.
Yeah.
Is it pretty to look at times? Oh yeah. Is the music fantastic? Definitely. But I'll be honest, I'd rather just listen to the album instead of watch the movie again. Because everything outside of the concert scenes is just not that compelling.
To be honest, I think most fans would probably say the same thing.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. But I don't think that makes it a bad movie. Dirty Dancing, it probably isn't a bad example. Classic soundtrack. Would I rather listen to the songs than see the movie? Would I rather listen to the album 5 times than see the movie 5 times? Yeah, probably.
Like another album.
Bodyguard, maybe.
Yeah, but at least those had a legitimate story that just kept moving. This one, the story's more or less just an excuse to get to the songs.
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
I mean, it's not an incorrect statement. Who cares? This is what they did. I don't know. We grade a lot of movies in the Oscar docket based on how they may have played.
Context.
Yeah, how they may have played for audiences. This movie made $68 million in 1982, or 1984 rather.
Yeah.
Which translates to almost $200 million today. It was a huge hit.
But I mean that.
Now I'm not saying the Transformers is a great movie.
I was going to say.
I understand.
Big money makers does not mean good movies.
I totally understand. You're right. But in the context that this is what we expect from a movie starring Prince and all of his bandmates.
It could be worse.
It could be worse.
Oh, it could be a lot worse.
Have you seen Spice World?
Oh, God.
Well, I know you
great.
love it with a passion.
I do love it.
You do?
I've seen most of it, but not enough to actually...
It's really bad. See, to me, Spice World is guilty pleasure good. Purple Rain is cheesy, but I think it's good.
Well, that's why, I mean, I don't feel like it was quite, like, so bad it's good.
Yeah.
But it's really cheesy.
It's very cheesy.
Which is fun. So, I don't know. It's like I said, it's on that line for me.
All right, so Oscar A to Z will wrap up the show, and that is Ballad of a Soldier. It's a 1959 Soviet film nominated for Best Original Screenplay. Justin?
And I found out why this movie existed. Maybe Justin will tell us.
What a movie.
I know a little bit, but
let's
compare notes.
Well, that's why it blew my mind when you said it was Russian. I'm like, wait a minute. And we're watching a Russian movie, but then I realized it won an Oscar, or it got nominated for an Oscar, right?
Nominated.
It got nominated for an Oscar in the 50s, and it's a Soviet Union movie.
I know.
That should not have happened.
Wild.
And it was because temporarily at that time, it was like 59, things were kind of cooling briefly, and there was an exchange program between them. We actually traded a couple films as kind of a goodwill gesture. Obviously, this was before Bay of Pigs, but this was actually a nice little peace treaty thing.
No, that was actually one of the cool things about the 50s is we got a lot of North America got to see a lot of more foreign movies.
But USSR though.
But yes,
USSR,
most definitely.
And also the fact that they allowed it to exist. Hardcore Soviet Russia. They didn't typically promote arts.
No.
So I mean, it's kind of awesome it exists.
Yeah.
However, Khrushchev was a fan of the director, which I thought was interesting.
Probably one reason it got made.
Probably. But let's get to the review. Vladimir Ivashov plays doomed soldier Private Aloysia Skvortsov, a war hero who could have received decoration for his bravery on the battlefield, but instead opts to return home to see his mother and help around the house. Skvortsov is granted 6 days in which he sees how much the war has taken its toll on the country, while desperately trying to help various military recruits and a frightened woman named Shura along the way. Now, for as many movies that we've covered on the podcast, we've seen a multitude of different takes on war, but Ballad is arguably one of the most well-edited and shot, in my opinion. Director Shukre does a brilliant job of making every shot come to life, and in doing so, makes the humanity, or even in some cases lack thereof, in this setting become at times heartwarming and absolutely devastating, sometimes almost simultaneously. Though unfortunately, at just shy of an hour and a half, the movie throws a lot at the viewer, and while much of it does in fact pack a punch, there are some great scenes in this movie. Others, most notable being the romantic subplot that really takes hold near the conclusion, just comes across as melodramatic. It doesn't hurt the movie significantly, but it is incredibly noticeable and does pull down a lot of the drama later on. But still, this is a really fascinating outlook on just how to perceive the war, going above and beyond what war movies could usually be called, in terms of, like, this isn't always about battle sequences, this is about just how a country handles war, which I thought was a fantastic perspective. I leave Ballad of a Soldier with a B+.
Joe?
So you could definitely say that it goes above and beyond of Above and Beyond.
Well, there was not enough sidewalk, I'll tell you that much, Joe.
There never will be, though. Really, I echo most of what Justin said. I think that this movie definitely had some strong setup performances, and it definitely feels like a really personal film. And I think that's definitely at the core of it. And I have to say, one thing that really stood out for me, though, is this movie has some of the most amazing cinematography. It's just beautiful to look at. I mean, it's amazingly shot, and it really does focus really well on some strong subject matter. And I also have to give it some extra points because of it. The fact that this was able to exist at this time and be part of that here at the Academy back in the 50s, I think just shows the great exchange of cultures and the fantastic films that could be outside of the United States, especially at the time, our biggest enemy. So
Yeah.
I think just for that alone, especially the subject matter of the film being about war and the devastation of it, I think it was pretty amazing that it occurred. I leave with a B+ as well.
Yeah, well, what impressed me so much is how this movie holds up very well. Its basic themes of, soldiers coming home on leave, young romance, family, humanity, they're all as universal today as they were in 1959. And it's also striking that, Joe sort of touched on this with the exchange of ideas between the countries, but there's no, real propaganda here. We see a lot of war movies, especially, post-World War II, that we've even done for the Oscars, that are very propaganda-heavy. There's not a lot of, politicking here. It's just a study of the character. I can see why the nomination was for screenplay. I do agree, Joe, the cinematography is great. The big downfall of the movie for me, though, I will agree, I guess, Justin, the romance is not great, but it's expected.
Well, it comes too late in the game.
What are you going to do? Yeah, I guess it comes a little bit late in the game. But the ending of the movie actually is part of the problem. With such a short runtime, it actually does start to sort of drag a little bit those last 15 minutes. We all thought it was going to end at a certain point, and then it keeps going, and I think it could have ended there and still been as effective. Would have been, a 75-minute movie, I guess, but
Technically
it
works.
still would have been effective.
Well, he
I
had to
think.
get back.
He did, but I don't know. I guess they could have left that a little bit
Open?
more open. I mean, we find out from the narrator at the beginning of the movie that he doesn't make it through the war, so, we know at least he dies at some point.
Yeah.
So, does he? Do we have to see him making it back? I don't know.
But the point of the movie is his initial journey. He's choosing to deny his own war accolades to go see his family.
Yeah, he has to get back, I guess. I don't know. I thought it would have been an alright place to end it, though.
Would have been a good shot to end on, at least.
Yeah, it definitely would have been a good shot to end on. Like Ex Machina, when they had that one great shot and then it kept going for 5 minutes.
Yeah, that annoyed me.
Yeah, that was annoying. I'm actually a little bit above you guys. It's an A- for me.
Okay.
Yeah, what a ballad.
What put it up for you?
I really feel like for it to have this same type of relevance 55 years after the fact, I think is impressive.
There's something to be said for that, definitely.
I think a lot of the Oscar movies, we say things like, oh, it was good for its time, or, well, yes, I can see how audiences back then would have appreciated it. I think somebody could watch this movie now and get pretty much exactly the same thing out of it that people got in 1959.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I don't think that's an easy feat.
No, most definitely not. And goodness knows we've seen enough movies that don't fit that bill.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Purple Rain. All right, well, that is going to wrap it up for the show. We have Boldly Going.
Just a side note here, I've actually been trying to play my first MMO ever. So I finally got Star Trek Online downloaded, and I completed the tutorial yesterday, and it was amazing.
Wow,
So,
interesting.
Strange timing, but
Very strange timing.
very, very cool so far. I like it.
Okay, very cool. We'll have the Boldly Going series coming up soon on Joe's channel. And if you'd like to subscribe to our channel, you can certainly do that. We'd love to have you aboard. And next week is Listener's Choice, but think about what you might want us to review for your Listener's Choice for next month. It is going to be Horror Month, so if you have something in mind that's a bit spooky that you want us to review, go ahead and submit that either on the YouTube channel, or you can contact us on Facebook, which is Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and the Twitter feed at Film Fanatics Pod. That is going to do it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.